Hey everybody, welcome to this video. This is the first in a series of videos where we're going to be targeting two objectives. The first is mastering the basics of querying data using SQL. So this is really focused on the technical skills around extracting information from data. And then the second objective is how do we make those skills even more valuable by bridging the gap between just the raw technical skills and information and where the business intent, where the product intent actually is. So being the bridge between the technical skills and what the product actually needs to be successful, that is a very good place to be if you are pursuing a career, if you want to be the most valuable asset you can be in a data role. So with that in mind, let's dive in. We have a telecom customer's data schema here where we only have one table, customer churn, and this is going to be the launching pad for us in this role-playing scenario where we are thrown into a project analyzing customer churn, and we want to try to deliver some value into this decision-making process around what are we going to do about customer churn. So right now we don't know anything about customer churn. All we know is that there's this table. So the first thing that we can do, the first thing I would always do when introduced to a new data source is let's just take a look at what this data actually looks like. So we can select everything from telecom customers.customer churn, and let's limit this to just 5 rows because we don't want to query the entire table. For all we know, this table's billions of rows, trillions of rows. And we don't want to start this project off by writing a query that's going to take down the database. So it's always nice to use this limit whenever you're doing something like select star from a table. So we select everything from this table, but we limit it to 5 rows, and we get a preview of what this data looks like. So we can see that there's a unique identifier for each of our customers. There are these categorical fields that are describing the gender of the customer. Looks like, does this person have a partner? Do they have dependents like children? Tenure, this one's an interesting one. We'll come back to this down the road, but what we really want to do, I want to use this as an example, this tenure field, as an example of the value you can get just by looking at what's available in the data and digesting it a little bit. As an example, we were talking about bridging that gap between the technical stuff and the product-y stuff. What we will likely find is that when talking about churn and talking about customers, the product side of the organization is probably thinking about customers in terms of loyal customers and the non-loyal or new customers. And what we'll find is there's probably a value gap between these different customer profiles, right? A loyal customer is someone who has done a lot of business with you. Losing a loyal customer is probably a lot worse than losing a new customer. But we don't have any fields, it looks like, in this list of categorical descriptions about our customers. Nothing outright says if someone's loyal or not. So just keep this in mind that sometimes when we're looking at the raw data isn't necessarily yet the perfect representation of what kind of value we could get from the data. So we might want to think about some definitions like what do we think a loyal customer is? And then we could use some of these raw building blocks to actually label customers as loyal, yes or no. So keeping that in our back pocket for later, we're just eyeballing all of this different data that's available, and some of that value we can get from just looking at this is thinking ahead to okay, there's some real potential in this data, but how do we want to partner with the product side of the organization to start to say, hey, let's use these building blocks to come up with these better even more advanced building blocks that we can put on top of the raw data that will enable us to better understand things like customer churn and better categorize our customers. All right, so just the final thing I want to point out here is we have a churn column that tells us yes or no, if somebody churned or not. And we also have the total revenue that a customer ever brought in under total charges versus the recurring revenue we get from a customer each month. All right, so we've seen this data at a really high level. Now let's start to get a better understanding of our customers. So we could do this by saying maybe we want the customer count. How many customers do we even have? Are we talking millions, hundreds, thousands? Well, we don't know yet. So we could say select count. Let's get the count of our distinct customer IDs. And we want to take this from that same table, telecom customers.customer churn. We're getting the distinct customer IDs because, well, we don't really know what's in this table. Maybe the same customer ID could appear multiple times. Maybe they have multiple accounts or something like that. So by getting the distinct customer IDs, we make sure that we don't double count any customer IDs. So we know that when we run this, 7,032, that's the number of distinct customer IDs we have that we're talking about. All right, so in the spirit of mastering the basics of SQL, let's format this a little bit to where we have our select statements and then we say where we're selecting the stuff from. But let's also think about how user-friendly the output is. Right now, this column that's describing our customer count, it's a mouthful. Count, distinct customer churn.customer ID. Well, this might be a lot nicer if we called this customer count. So what we've done here is we've just aliased the aggregation. You could think of it as this is the formula. Well, do you want to give this thing a prettier label? Yes, we do. Well, that is the alias that we can use or that we can assign using this as command. All right, so now we know how many customers there are, but we want to know how many have churned. So we can add the churn column into the mix. And whenever we're mixing aggregations like this count of our distinct customer IDs with dimensions, this is what we would call introducing the concept of grouping our data. We are grouping by churn, and then we are performing this aggregation. So what does this look like? Well, it gives us all of the possible values inside of our churn dimension. In this case, there's really just yes or no. Did someone churn or did they not? All right, so we have this basic coverage now of how do we get information from the table, some of the very basics of SQL, and we've sprinkled on top of that some of the so what that we want to be keeping in the back of our mind about the information that's available and how might this information be useful to the business. So in the next videos, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper down this rabbit hole and figuring out what other ways can we begin to enrich these queries to start to get to a better understanding of customer churn. So hope to see you there in those videos.